Hey everybody, and welcome to another level 1 box. Today we're making a journal using a Coptic stitch method. Alright, for bookbinding, today you're going to need a pencil. Pretty straightforward there. You're going to need some scissors. From there you're going to need a needle, definitely provided. There's a couple different sizes, choose any. You'll need a bone folder. It's not real bone and yours might look a little different. You'll need some wax thread. You're also going to need a ruler or just a straight edge will do as well, but rulers are also nice. I got my Dare ruler. How long has that been around? You've got your cover material. This could be leather, this could be an album cover, really whatever you want it to be. You've got 40 sheets of paper today. You've also got an awl. That's AWL. It's pretty sharp, so be careful. It's going to be used to poke some things later. You've also got a clip. Optional, you don't really need it, but it's nice if you want to take a break. Alright, now for this first step, we're going to be folding paper, so you're going to push everything to the side. You're going to need your bone folder, your 40 sheets of paper. We're going to be folding those in half. Now this bone folder, like I said, it might be a different shape, it might be a different size, but that's totally fine. It's going to get the job done. Either way, it's just going to give us nice, flat creases. So take a piece of paper, you're going to fold it in half, give it a crease with your fingers, just so long as it's as in half as possible. Press it nice and flat with your bone folder, and put it to the side. Now you're going to do this for all 40 sheets of paper. Again, you're going to be going through, taking your time, using the bone folder, and we're not looking for perfection, just do your best. Alright, now that we are folded our very 40th piece of paper, we're going to move on and work with our cover now. So let's get these all together. Let's just give them a nice little stack, keep them as neat as we can. In a couple of minutes, we're going to make these into little tiny booklets called signatures. Those are going to be 4 sheets apiece. Before we do that, let's work on our cover. Now you've got your cover here. What you're going to want to do is fold this cover in half or measure in half. Either way, use a straight edge. I'm using just one of the signatures here, one of the little pieces of paper. Draw a line directly down the middle of this cover. We're going to have a cover on the very front and a cover on the back. And you've got that good, make sure it's nice in half, and that line is exact the half mark there. Just grab your scissors or anything that you've got. You can use an X-Acto knife. Whatever you have is going to be great. You're going to cut that right down the middle. And at this point, depending on what you want to be your front, your back, your top, your bottom, just make sure you put those to the side in the order that you choose. If you're using an album cover, for example, you're going to want to make sure that it faces the right direction. Alright, now we've got our papers. We've got signatures we're going to make. Now a signature is basically a tiny little booklet of a couple of these folded pieces of paper. We're going to do 4 sheets per signature. Now once we've got all 4 in there, we're just going to level it out, make it nice and flat on all edges. We'll do this throughout the process as well. And this is a very repetitive maneuver. So we're going to put that to the side in the order that we folded it. Now, just like me, when I originally started doing some bookbinding, I thought, I'm going to try and cut some corners. So instead of just putting 4 in there, I thought, well, I can make it easier if I make it double. Why don't I put 8 in there or even 10? And we can go and we can do the project just like that. Try to avoid doing this. For one, it's not really going to match up with the video. But for two, when you start to line everything up here, you're going to notice that there's a little lip on the papers. What's going to happen is the inside 4 or 5 pieces of paper are going to start to stick out just because of how you folded them. And that's no big deal. So you're going to want to go back to those 4 original papers per signature. So take your time, put on your favorite jam, fold 4 per. Once you've got those, you're going to make them into a neat little stack. Now you should have 10 of these. If you don't, that's okay, you can grab some more paper. You can do it with less, it's not a big deal, but it does make a nice, even, and good sized book for us. Now I'm just flattening them all out because sometimes you got some stray loose ends when you pop them in there. No big deal. Now that you have your booklet all made, what you're going to be doing, setting this to the side. Next up, we're going to use our awl, so get that ready. You're also going to need just a piece of cardboard. Feel free to use the level 1 box that we gave you. You can undo it. Anything will totally work. You're also going to need a ruler or a straight edge. And you're definitely going to need a pencil. Now once you've got all this, you're just going to take one off just like that. We're going to be doing a little bit of a measurement here. Now it doesn't necessarily matter if you get this perfect and right on the head, but what I used typically is about 1 inch from either top or bottom, and I measured about 3/4 of an inch for my dots. We'll be making 3 dots towards the bottom, like I said, about 1 inch from the bottom starting, a dot there, measured about 3/4 of an inch, a dot there, a dot there. We'll move over to the top, and we'll do the exact same thing, about 1 inch from the top. I'll do 1, 3/4 of an inch, 1, 3/4 of an inch, a final one there. And again, so long as these are consistent and you're okay with where they're going to be, it's just basically where we're going to be sewing the book together. Now that you've got those, you're going to want to transfer all of those onto all of your signatures. So that way, you're sewing in the correct order. You're not only doing that, but you're also sewing it so that it's not going to look jagged as a book and it's going to be nice and flat. Grab your straight edge, your ruler, or anything you've got, and you're going to be drawing a line straight up where that top dot is. That way, you're marking every single signature. So that way, if for whatever reason they get out of line, you always know where to put them, how to sew them. So you've got 3 at the top, and you've got 3 lines at the bottom. As you can see here, every signature has now been marked with a line. Now you're going to put that to the side and grab your cardboard, because now it's time to use that awl and start sticking some holes in this paper. You're going to open it up, and we're going to be poking holes straight through the entire piece of paper, trying to keep it as flat as we can and as together as we can, poking right through that hole. You'll be making 6 holes per signature. So once you've got it all lined up, try and be careful to make sure it's all nice, poke it straight through, and you're good to go. Now the reason we're using cardboard underneath, if we just had a flat surface and we were trying to poke, we would be damaging our flat surface and the hole wouldn't really be going through the entire booklet. So that's totally fine. Take your time with this, and you can make the holes as big or as small as you want to. Just remember we're going to be passing a needle through them, so you don't want to be too big, but at the same time, if they're too small, it's going to be harder for us to put the needle through. Now we've got our cover, and it's time to poke holes in the cover as well. Now this again isn't a precise science. What we're going to be doing is putting one of our signatures on top of our cover, making sure that's where we want to poke the hole, so that's going to be where the binding and the stitching is. You're going to measure maybe about a 1/2 inch, 1/4 of an inch from the edge, and we'll be poking holes in the same exact spots that are on our signatures. Now with this particular material, once you poke a hole, sometimes it will cover itself kind of back up, so you might have to poke it a little bit larger or twice. Now we're going to take the other part of our cover, and we're going to be poking a hole through where we've already poked it and into the bottom cover as well. That way, both of our covers are nice and consistent. Again, keep in mind that if you're going to be using something like an album cover or a picture or something with a directional surface, as you can see this one doesn't really matter the top or the bottom, you're going to want to make sure that you make those holes on the correct sides, top, bottom, left, or right. Now that I've got that all taken care of, I've got all the holes made, I'm going to put my booklet together as if it were technically sewn. We're going to have a look, we're going to make sure that we didn't mess up with any of our holes, that everything's in the right order, nothing's upside down, and that we're ready to sew. Now that you've got your wax thread, you're going to be using about 25 feet, or 5 wingspans. If you hold the string in one hand, the spool in the other, and you go wingspan about 5 times, that's typically about 25 feet. Now once you've passed it through your needle, you're going to be holding both of those ends on the wax thread, and you're going to make a knot. Now it doesn't really matter what knot you make. Since it's wax thread, it's going to be more of a thicker knot, but if you'd like to do 2 knots, you definitely can do that as well. I did 2 just to show you guys that it's not a big deal if you do 1 or if you do 2. Once you've got your knot going, what we're going to make sure that we do is we're going to straighten this string out as best we can, and we're going to get the needle at the very middle of both of these sets of wax string. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold it in one hand, I'll put my finger through, and I'll just continually pull, nice and gentle, making sure that it's nice and even. Now eventually you will get to your needle, and you're just going to want to hold that needle and pull it to the very, very end, so that's in the middle of both of those sets of string. Again, take your time on this, don't poke yourself, and the slower you go with the string, the better your project's going to be. Now that you got it to the very middle, it's time to move on with our project. Grab your booklet, and like I said, we're going to be making it upside down. So starting with the bottom first, the cover and the bottom signature, we're going to be starting to sew. Now this cover part can be a little confusing, so follow along, pause the video as often as you need, and rewatch it as many times as you like. Starting with the needle and the open bottom signature, you're going to be going straight through one of the outside holes. It doesn't matter which one you start with, you'll just be going from left to right or from right to left. Once you've poked it through the entire signature, you're going to pull it to the very end. At the beginning, you're going to have a lot of thread, but don't worry, the more you sew, the less there'll be. Pull it all the way until you get the knot nice and flat onto the signature. Don't pull too hard, as that knot might go straight through the paper, and you certainly don't want that. After, you're going to be poking a hole right through the one you all went through earlier, through the bottom, and then out through the top of your cover material. Now take your time as you start to pull your thread. The faster you pull, the more twisted it becomes. So take your time. It is a lot of thread, and make sure you've got a clean working environment. It definitely helps. As I finally pull it tight, remember not to pull too tight, especially in the beginning parts here. If you pull too tight, as we'll see a little bit later, your cover material will start to bend and it'll start to fold towards the inside. Since we don't technically have a spine, it's just an open, no glue type of stitch. Now once you've gone all the way through, you're going to be reaching around, sticking your needle under and wrapping it around that string. Now this can be the hardest part to see, so I'm going to show you this multiple times throughout the video. Once you've wrapped it all the way around, getting a nice secure hold, you can see in the back side that it goes through. We'll be taking the needle and we'll be pushing it through the original hole that we just sewed out of. We'll be doing this for every single hole, in essence sewing out and sewing back in to the same hole. Now that I've pulled it on through, give it a nice firm tug, it should comb right through. Sometimes you will end up sewing through the wax thread, and that's okay too. Don't worry about it. Again, we're not going for perfection here, and the slower you go, the better you're gonna do. As you pull it nice and taut, we're going to be doing basically the same maneuver on every hole for this first signature. Things will change slightly when we get to the next signatures, but the video is going to take us there. For now, I'm going to check that I haven't pulled too tight, everything's nice, and then what I'll be doing is I'll be sewing through the next hole, doing the exact same thing that I did previously. Sewing through the second hole of the signature, I'll poke the needle through, I'll pull the string nice and gently, and taking my time, I'll go until it's taut. Now that I have it through, I'll be doing that around maneuver again. So again, I'll be poking it through the bottom of the cover. Once it's through, I'll be pulling it nice and taut, and then I'll be going around that bottom stitch just to make sure everything's all locked in place. As you can see, my string is starting to get a little bit twisted, but don't worry, as it gets twisted, if you take your time, it'll slowly untwist itself. I'll show you a method a little bit later in the video as to how to untwist it, if it's really frustrating you. So again, we'll be sewing below, around, and then through, making sure it locks itself into place. Once you've got it around and through, give it a little tug to make sure it's taut, but not too tight, because again, we don't want that bottom material to be coming over the spine. You'll be sewing right on through that hole, just like before, and we'll continue with the book in the same fashion. Always sewing out, around, and then back through. As you move into the third hole, and then the fourth and the fifth, nothing will change from this bottom signature. So again, keep on sewing through the bottom, around, and then back through the hole. When you get to the big gap in the middle, don't worry, you're just going to sew as if it's a small gap and continue doing the exact same throughout the entire bottom signature. Now that we've come to our very last hole, not much is going to change. You're going to go out just like you did before. You're going to go through the bottom and around. But this time, instead of sewing through that last signature, you'll be taking your next signature, folding it over. We'll be sewing into the following signature through that hole. Again, depending if you started left to right or right to left, you'll simply be sewing into the next available hole for the signature. This is going to keep everything nice and tight. When you first sew through, it might seem a little loose, but as you start to tighten up the rest of the holes, everything will make sure it comes on tight. Now, as you can see, I've got a little snag here in my line. Everything's getting a little twisted. I pulled a little bit too fast, and this will happen. Don't panic, and certainly don't try and pull it all the way through. If you do that, there will definitely be a tangle. If you take your time, slowly run your fingers down, and try and untwist it along the way, it will become untangled, but definitely take your time because at the beginning you will have a lot of extra string. Once you've got it untangled, slowly pull it all the way through, make sure there's no more knots, and you're good to go. Just like before, you'll be poking your out through that signature, but this time, instead of sewing through the cover, you'll just be sewing around the signature before it. As you can see, there's a little bit of string just like before. You'll be going down through the previous signatures, around, and coming out through. The only difference from the before one is you're not going to be going through the cover, you're just going around. Once you got it pulled all the way through and all the way around, you'll be sewing right out the hole that you came in. Again, we're always sewing out, down and around, and back through that same hole. Open your signature up, find the hole, and poke it on through. Sometimes it happens that you poke through only 2 of the papers of the signature, but just come right back out and poke through all of them. Once you've got it pulled nice and taut, I'm going to show you how we're going to undo a tangle in our line. If things are starting to get a little twisted, just like before, run your finger straight through the middle, keeping it as level and pulling both sides equally. Your finger might catch on some snags, but just do it nice and slow, untwist it with your fingers, and then pull it. When you finally do get to the needle, it might be a little off-centered, so make sure to center it. Once it's pulled to the center, get everything out of your way and resume sewing. Straight on out, pull it through, nice and slow, and then around that bottom signature. Once you've got it pulled through, you're going to be continuing this the exact same way throughout the rest of the booklet. Always going out, down and around, and through. Now that you got through and around to your last hole of that signature, it's the same as before. Just keep going around as you do. Pull it on through. Once you have that nice and taut, you'll be grabbing your next signature. Just like before, you'll line it up, find the next available hole, poke it through, pull it, and continue just like previously. As your book starts to form, you're going to see that stitch, the Coptic stitch, nice and uniform through all 6 of your lines and all 6 of your holes. Now as you're finishing up your book, feel free to go back through this video if you need any corrections or if you're confused about anything. Eventually, you're going to get to the point where it's time for the very last. Now before you sew into your last signature, it's very important to save the last signature along with that top cover. What we're going to be doing is sewing through the top cover, and before we do that, your holes might have closed up on your cover material, so just take your awl and reopen up those holes so you know what you're sewing through. Taking your needle and not sewing through the last signature yet, we'll be sewing through the cover, straight through the top, making sure you find the right hole so that everything lines up with your cover and your signatures. Pulling it all the way through. Once you have it nice and taut, try and line up your pages as best as possible. This might be where the clip comes in handy if you don't want that last signature to get out of place. Either way, it just takes a little bit of finagling. Once you've got that, you'll be taking the string just like before, but you're going to be going around that top signature instead of the one below it. This is just unique for this first time. After, I'm going to show you how we're going to do the rest of the holes. Once you've got it nice and taut, but again, not too tight because you don't want to pull that cover in, you'll be sewing right out that first hole on the last and top signature. This is hard to do, so you might want to open it up with your fingers, line it up, push it through, because this is the first time we'll actually be lining up this top signature and sewing it into the book. Once you've got it pulled through and everything's nice and taut, you'll be going through the second hole. Now this will be a little bit different than before, so once you poke it out the front, you'll be pulling it nice and taut. From this point, you can see that everything's nice and tight, and you'll be sewing around the bottom signature like before. Pushing it through and sewing around the bottom signature can be hard, so you might have to push it through, open on up, pull it all the way, and then push it through again, just going around that bottom signature hole. As you get towards the top, things become a lot more tight and a lot more difficult. As you've pulled to the very top now, we're time to go through the actual cover. You'll have to poke through the cover, pull it through, and then just push it around the side. This doesn't involve any stitching or sewing or anything, but you do have to just pull it around to the side so it stays and remains nice and taut. Now that you have that, it's pulled nice and taut, we'll be going around one more time the signature just below it. Again, opening it up, pulling it through, around, and nice and taut. Now this might be the hardest part of the journal. What you're going to have to do now is poke it through that same hole that you came out of. There's a lot of stitching at this point, so it might be hard to find. You might have to open it up, push it through. It's tough to do. Either way, take your time, find the hole, and once you do, push it all the way through. Don't be worried, your needle's not going to break, and your thread's very strong. Once you have that, all nice and taut, but not too tight as you don't want the cover to go into the spine, you're going to continue on the same way we just did that second hole. Again, poking it straight on out. Pulling it nice and taut, and then around, through, and eventually you'll get to the very final line. Once you do that, you do everything the exact same way, and you sew back through the original signature. It's time to finally finish and tie off your journal. This is so exciting. You've made it all the way down, you're almost done, and all you have to do is tie it off into a simple knot, and once you have that, your book is done. Now before you do, you might want to try and fix your cover if you pulled too tightly. It's okay if you did. As you work with your journal and you use it more and more, the cover will become a little bit more pliable. Now as you pull it through, we're just going to be making a simple knot. It doesn't really matter which knot you make, so long as you know how to make it and you think it's tight, you'll be okay. There's enough stitching, so it's not going to be coming undone anytime soon. Pull it nice and tight, and you can consider yourself good to go. Now if you're concerned and you want to make a second knot, don't worry, you can. Keep sewing it through. One, sew it through another, and just make a simple knot around. Don't make it too complicated. The more complicated and the more you stitch, the more that's going to be left on the inside of your journal. You can always cut this off later with a pair of scissors or nice needle nose, but it's up to you how many knots you want to put in it. 1 is sufficient and 2 is definitely fine. Once you've got it all done, grab your pair of scissors, cut with a little bit of slack close to the knot, move all your things to the side, and get excited because your book's all done. Congratulations on making your very first bookbinding project. Don't worry if you didn't do it perfect. There's enough material for you to do another bookbinding project, and now that you have all of the tools necessary, it's only important you find more paper, cover material, and anything else you might need. Now the book will lay flat and you don't have to glue anything with this Coptic stitch, making it a really nice project and easy to do over and over again. Congratulations, and consider yourself another Level 1 graduate.